I learned this lesson the hard way. If you don't respect yourself, the world won't respect you either. And when the world doesn't respect you, it doesn't ask politely, it takes advantage, it pushes boundaries. And it leaves you wondering why you feel overlooked, undervalued, and stuck. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like people don't take you seriously, like your time isn't valued, or like you keep giving more than you receive? If that's you, I want you to comment, "I choose respect," below, because that simple decision can change the entire direction of your life. I've spent decades studying success, achievement, and human potential, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Self-respect is not optional. It is foundational. It is the starting point of confidence, success, wealth, and fulfillment. Without it, everything else becomes fragile. You see, the world operates on a simple principle: people treat you the way you teach them to treat you. If you tolerate disrespect, you will receive more of it. If you allow people to waste your time, they will continue to do so. If you constantly put yourself last, the world will happily agree with your decision. And here's the truth: most people don't want to face lack of respect from others. Usually begins with a lack of respect for yourself. I've met thousands of people over the years, and the pattern is always the same. The ones who struggle the most are often the ones who say yes when they mean no. They avoid conflict. They seek approval. They sacrifice their own values just to be liked. And in doing so, they slowly erode their own sense of worth. Let me be very clear with you. Every time you betray your own standards, you send a message to your subconscious mind that you are not important. And your subconscious mind listens carefully. It records everything. Then it reflects that belief back into your behavior, your decisions, and ultimately your results. Self-respect begins with clarity. You must decide who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer tolerate. This is not about arrogance or ego. It's about alignment. It's about integrity. It's about living in a way that is consistent with your highest values. I remember a turning point in my own life when I realized I had been accepting less than I deserved, not because others forced it on me, but because I allowed it. That realization changed everything. Because the moment you accept responsibility, you gain power. And power is what you need if you want to stop the world from running you over. Here's something important. Confidence is not something you're born with. It is built through action. It grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. It strengthens every time you stand your ground. And it expands every time you choose long-term respect over short-term comfort. Most people avoid difficult conversations. They avoid setting boundaries because they fear rejection. But let me tell you something that will shift your perspective. People respect clarity more than they respect compliance. When you say, "This is what I expect," and you say it calmly and confidently, you send a signal. You communicate strength. You communicate self-worth. And even if someone doesn't like it, they will recognize it. And recognition is the first step toward respect. Think about the most respected individuals you know. They are not the ones who try to please everyone. They are the ones who have standards. They have boundaries. They have a clear sense of identity. And they are willing to walk away from anything that violates their principles. That's the key: willingness to walk away. If you are not willing to walk away from disrespect, you will continue to attract it. Because the world tests you, people test you, situations test you. And every test is an opportunity to either reinforce your self-respect or weaken it. Now I want you to think about your own life. Where are you tolerating behavior that you know is not right? Where? Are you saying yes when you should be saying no? Where are you shrinking yourself just to fit into someone else's expectations? These are not small questions. These are life-defining questions. Because every time you ignore them, you move further away from the person you are capable of becoming. Self-respect is also deeply connected to discipline. You cannot truly respect yourself if you constantly break your own commitments. If you say you're going to wake up early, do it. If you say you're going to work on your goals, follow through. If you say you're going to take care of your health, honor that promise. Why? Because every kept promise builds trust with yourself. And self-trust is the backbone of self-respect. Without it, you hesitate. You doubt. You second guess. But with it, you move forward with certainty. You make decisions faster. You take action with confidence. And most importantly, you stop seeking validation from others. Let me give you a powerful idea. Stop asking for permission to be who you are. You don't need approval to set standards. You don't need validation to pursue your goals. And you certainly don't need anyone's agreement to respect yourself. The moment you understand this, you reclaim control over your life. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. It's not. In fact, it can be uncomfortable. People may resist the new version of you. They may question your boundaries. They may even try to pull you back into your old patterns. But that's part of the process. Growth always disrupts comfort, yours and theirs. The key is to stay consistent, because consistency is what turns a decision into an identity. And once self-respect becomes part of your identity, everything changes. You start choosing better opportunities. You start surrounding yourself with better people. You start making decisions that align with your future instead of your fears. And gradually, the world begins to respond differently to you, because you're no longer the person who tolerates being run over. You're the person who stands firm. You're the person who knows their worth. And most importantly, you're the person who acts like it. Now, let me challenge you starting today. Make one decision that reflects self-respect. Just one. It could be as simple as saying no to something that drains you, or as powerful as committing to a goal you've been avoiding. The size of the decision doesn't matter. What matters is the direction, because every step you take towards self-respect is a step away from being controlled by others, and that is how you begin to take your life back. I'll tell you this from experience: the world doesn't slow down, doesn't adjust itself to your needs. It keeps moving. And if you don't establish your position, your standards, your boundaries, it will move right over you without hesitation. But when you respect yourself truly, deeply, consistently, you become unshakable. And that's where your real power begins. Now let me take you deeper, because understanding self-respect is one thing, but living it daily is where most people struggle. I've found that one of the biggest enemies of self-respect is the desire to be liked by everyone. And I want you to really think about this: if your goal is to be liked by everyone, you will end up being respected by no one, including yourself. You see, approval is a moving target. The more you chase it, the more it escapes you. And in the process, you start adjusting your behavior, your words, even your values, just to fit into someone else's expectations. That's not strength, that's surrender. When I made the decision to stop seeking approval and start living by my own standards, everything shifted. I became more decisive. I became more focused. And most importantly, I became more at peace with myself. Because peace doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from being in alignment with who you truly are. Here's something practical I want you to apply immediately. Start paying attention to where you compromise your standards. Not in big dramatic ways, but in the small, everyday moments. Because that's where self-respect is either built or broken. When you let someone interrupt you repeatedly without addressing it, you chip away at your self-respect. When you agree to something you don't want to do, just to avoid discomfort, you weaken your boundaries. When you ignore your own goals to accommodate someone else's priorities, you send a message that your time is not valuable. And over time, these small moments accumulate. They shape your identity. They determine how you feel about yourself. And they influence how others treat you. Now, let me give you a powerful shift in perspective. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve you, you are saying no to something that does. Think about that carefully. Your time, your energy, your focus, these are your most valuable assets. And if you don't protect them, no one else will. Highly successful people understand this at a very deep level. They are extremely selective with their time. They don't overcommit. They don't overextend. And they don't apologize for having priorities. That's not selfish, that's strategic. Because when you respect your time, others begin to respect it too. Another key element of self-respect is how you talk to yourself. This is something most people overlook, but it's absolutely critical. Your internal dialogue is shaping your reality every single day. If you constantly criticize yourself, doubt yourself, or replay your mistakes, you create a mental environment where self-respect cannot survive. But when you speak to yourself with clarity, encouragement, and accountability, you create a foundation for growth. I'm not talking about blind positivity. I'm talking about honest, constructive thinking. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, ask yourself, what can I do to improve? Instead of focusing on failure, focus on feedback. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, direct your attention to what you can do better next time. That shift alone can change your entire trajectory. Because self-respect is not about being perfect, it's about being committed to progress. Now let's talk about boundaries, because this is where self-respect becomes visible to the outside world. A boundary is simply a line that defines what you will and will not accept. And if you don't define that line, others will define it for you. I've seen people struggle for years because they never learn how to set clear boundaries. They feel overwhelmed, overworked, and underappreciated. And when you look closely, the problem isn't just external, it's internal. They never gave themselves permission to say, this is not okay. So let me give you that permission right now. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to remove yourself from situations that drain you. And you are allowed to expect respect from others. But here's the key: you must enforce your boundaries consistently. Because the first time you set a boundary, people will test it. Not because they're bad people, but because they're used to the old version of you. And if you give in, even once, you send a signal that your boundary is flexible. Consistency is what turns a boundary into a standard. And standards are what define your life. Now I want to address something that often holds people back: the fear of losing relationships. Many people tolerate disrespect because they're afraid of being alone. They think, if I speak up, I might lose this person. But let me ask you, what are you really holding on to? A relationship without respect is not a relationship, it's a liability. And the longer you stay in it, the more it costs you in confidence, energy, and self-worth. When you begin to respect yourself, you may outgrow certain people. That's natural. That's part of growth. And while it may feel uncomfortable at first, it creates space for something better. Because when you raise your standards, you attract people who meet them. That's how transformation works. Let me also remind you to have self-respect is not loud. It's not aggressive. It doesn't require you to dominate others or prove anything. In fact, true self-respect is calm, quiet, and steady. It's the way you carry yourself. It's the way you make decisions. It's the way you respond under pressure. When you truly respect yourself, you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You simply live it, and people feel it. Now here's a powerful exercise. I want you to try and imagine the highest version of yourself, the version of you that is confident, disciplined, focused, and respected. Now ask yourself, what would that version of me do in this situation? That question alone can guide your behavior in a completely different direction, because it shifts your focus from emotion to intention, from reaction to action, from weakness to strength. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You begin to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And that gap, that's where growth happens. Let me tell you something else I've learned. Self-respect is built in private, but it shows up in public. It's built in the early mornings when you choose discipline over comfort. It's built in the quiet moments when you choose integrity over shortcuts. It's built when no one is watching, but you still do the right thing. And over time, those private decisions create a public presence that commands respect, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. So if you feel like the world has been running you over, don't look outward, first look inward. Ask yourself, where have I been allowing this? Because the moment you take ownership, you take control, and control is the starting point of change. Now I want you to make a commitment, not to me, but to yourself. Commit to raising your standards. Commit to protecting your time. Commit to speaking up when it matters. And most importantly, commit to becoming someone you can respect. Because when you respect yourself, everything else begins to align. Opportunities improve. Relationships improve. Your mindset improves. And your entire life begins to move in a new direction. But it all starts with a decision. A decision that says, I will no longer accept less than I deserve. And once you make that decision and back it up with action, the world has no choice but to respond. Now let me bring this home, because everything we've talked about means nothing without action. At some point, you have to stop listening, stop analyzing, and start deciding. Because your life does not change from information, it changes from commitment. And commitment is where most people hesitate. They say they want respect, they say they want confidence, they say they want a better life, but when the moment comes to act, they fall back into old patterns. They stay silent when they should speak. They agree when they should decline. They settle when they should stand firm. And every time that happens, they reinforce the very reality they're trying to escape. So let me ask you directly, how much longer are you willing to tolerate that? Because there is a cost to not respecting yourself. And that cost shows up in your results. It shows up in your relationships. It shows up in your income, your health, your happiness, and your sense of direction. You don't drift into a life of meaning, you design it. And the blueprint always begins with how you see yourself. If you see yourself as someone who is easily overlooked, you will behave that way. If you see yourself as someone who deserves very little, you will accept very little. But when you truly decide that you are worthy of respect, your behavior begins to change immediately. And behavior is what creates results. Let me give you a principle that can transform your life if you apply it consistently. Act as if. Act as if you already have the self-respect you desire. Act as if your time is valuable. Act as if your voice matters. Act as if your goals are worth pursuing. Now, this is not about pretending. It's about practicing. Because every action you take sends a message to your mind. And your mind responds by strengthening that identity. If you act with confidence, even when you don't feel it, you begin to build confidence. If you act with discipline, even when it's difficult, you begin to build discipline. And if you act with self-respect, even when it's uncomfortable, you begin to embody it. That's how transformation happens from the outside in and the inside out at the same time. Now, let's talk about resilience, because the moment you start changing, you will face resistance. There will be people who question you. There will be moments when you doubt yourself. There will be situations that test your commitment. And in those moments, you have to remember why you started. You didn't start this journey just to feel comfortable. You started it to grow, to improve, to become someone stronger, more capable, and more fulfilled. So when things get difficult, don't interpret that as a sign to stop. Interpret it as a sign that you are stepping outside your old limitations. That's where growth lies. I've seen it time and time again. People who decide to raise their standards often go through a period of discomfort. But on the other side of that discomfort is a new level of confidence, a new level of clarity, and a new level of control over their lives. And that's what you're building here, not just confidence, but control. Control over your decisions, control over your direction, control over who you become, because when you have self-respect, you are no longer reactive. You don't let circumstances dictate your behavior. You choose your response. You stay grounded. You stay focused. And you move forward with purpose. Now I want to give you something simple, but incredibly powerful, a daily standard. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. Did I act in a way that I can respect today? That question will force you to reflect. It will bring awareness to your choices. And over time, it will guide your behavior in a completely new direction. Because when you hold yourself accountable, you raise your standards. And when you raise your standards, your life rises with them. Let me also remind you, this is a lifelong practice. Self-respect is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you reinforce daily through your actions, your decisions, and your mindset. There will be days when you fall short. That's okay. What matters is that you recognize it, learn from it, and get back on track immediately. Because consistency beats perfection every single time. And the more consistent you are, the stronger your identity becomes. You begin to see yourself differently. You begin to trust yourself more. And that trust, that's what allows you to take bigger risks, pursue bigger goals, and create a bigger life. Now think about the impact of that. When you respect yourself, you don't just change your own life, you influence everyone around you. You set a standard. You show others what's possible. You create an environment where respect becomes the norm, not the exception. And that ripple effect can be incredibly powerful. But it all starts with you. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now, right here. Make the decision that from this point forward, you will no longer allow the world to run you over. You will no longer shrink to fit into spaces that don't value you. You will no longer trade your standards for temporary comfort. Instead, you will rise. You will stand firm. You will speak clearly. You will act decisively. And you will build a life that reflects the respect you have for yourself. Because at the end of the day, this is your life, your time, your potential. And no one is going to protect it for you. That responsibility belongs to you. But here's the good news that also means the power belongs to you. The power to change, the power to grow, the power to decide who you are and what you stand for. So take that power seriously. Use it wisely. And most importantly, use it consistently. Because when you do, something remarkable happens. The world begins to respond to you differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. And that is the moment when everything starts to shift. That is the moment when you stop being overlooked. That is the moment when you stop being taken for granted. That is the moment when you become unstoppable, not because life is easy, but because you are strong. Strong in your values. Strong in your decisions. Strong in your self-respect. And when you reach that point, no one and nothing can run you over again. If this message resonated with you, I want you to take one final action comment below with "I respect myself." Say it, own it, and begin to live it starting today. Because your future will be built on the standards you choose right now. And I'll leave you with this: respect yourself and the world will have no choice but to follow.